Alright, so this is the end of day 12. Finally got the first, it's the first half. I obviously didn't do this because I have so much stuff back here, but tomorrow I can lay the plywood and move all this stuff onto here and then start this back. So I did this, and this was one day's work. I got here at 10:30 in the morning, and it is about 2:30 in the afternoon, or in the evening, and I'm done. I just finished. So yeah, a couple things. Furring strips, I was going to just glue them down. The strips were nice and even. They were flat. The bus floor, unfortunately, isn't completely flat. So against my better judgment, I'm going to have to drill a hole on each end of on each section, each end, just to hold it down perfectly and nice and tight. I was going to rely on the liquid nails, but there's just pieces, there's like 2 or 3 pieces here and there that they just don't want to sit flush to the floor. So I'm gonna put 2 screws on the end of each board and just be done with it. I'm gonna pre-drill the holes, shoot a whole bunch of silicone inside the hole, and then drill it down to the floor. Then I'm gonna go underneath the bus and just make sure I spray the end of the bolt with a rust inhibitor. Yeah, it'll just hold the floor a lot better. Liquid nails is great on flat surfaces with completely flat items. This bus floor has been patched. It wasn't completely flat. It was very flat, but not completely flat. And if it's not like flat, it's liquid nails is not going to hold the boards flush at all. I got 90% of it down, but there's like 4 boards that just are a little stubborn in certain areas where I used Bondo or whatever. But other than that, this came out awesome. I mean, it looks great, I think. So what I did was, when you lay the subfloor down, it's obviously a 4x8 sheet. It's going to go 8 feet this way, 4 feet this way. Actually, 7.5 feet this way, 4 feet this way. So the edge of the plywood is going to go, and every time that plywood ends, it has to end on a beam, in the middle of a beam. So the next board can start and go to the next middle of the beam. So all the edges of the plywood are supported by a beam. In order to do that without going crazy and making myself nuts, these boards on the side are cut in exactly the same length as a piece of plywood, 4 feet. I started it at the very front, and then the board that runs across is on the side of this. So this side beam goes all the way to the front, and then this board butts up against it. That allows me to know 4 feet down, exactly where that seam is on that side rail is where that plywood is going to end. So you go put a beam right in the middle of the seam. That way you know when you lay the plywood, it goes down, it's going to land in the middle of that beam. Same thing on this side. It goes down 4 feet. There's a seam right there. I know that I have to put a beam all the way across there because that's where that plywood's going to land. Then the next piece of plywood goes on the middle of that also. It comes down, and where there's a seam, there's another beam. So the plywood, the edge of the plywood will rest right in the middle of that beam. You can measure it, 48, 96, 144, and do it that way, but it gets a little, with all these boxes and trying to remember numbers, it gets a little bit confusing, and you can mess up. So I just thought of it ahead of time to just cut those down in 4-foot sections. That way I won't have to be guessing. If there's not a seam there, I know that the plywood is not going to rest there. So that's how I did that, and that's how I got these because the sheet of plywood starts there, it's gonna end there, and that's how I knew, like without fail, that plywood is going to end there because that beam is the same exact length. So I got a piece of plywood will cover up that, piece of plywood will cover up this, and a piece of plywood will cover up this, and then half a piece of plywood will cover this piece. And then it'll go into this section right here. So it'll be a piece of plywood cut like this. Something like that. And yeah, I mean, what I did here was I gridded it out, and then I liquid nailed everything down. Then underneath this insulation, this is ISO insulation, so it's pretty good stuff. I mean, it's not foam, not like the cheap foam crap, but it's foil on one side, closed cell insulation in the inside, and then a piece of that blue Dow plastic on the bottom. Now, in order to stay away from putting that plastic directly butted up against that painted floor, what I used was like a breather. It's like a mat, and it allows it's like a hard mat, and it allows the the thing to sit just slightly. It allows air to get underneath there. So if there's ever any moisture or whatever, it can dry out. One thing about this is just make sure you seal all your windows up before you do this, because if you do this and it rains and you have a major leak and it goes underneath your floor right now, you're done. It'll destroy your floor. So yeah, I mean, that's it. Tomorrow I lay the plywood down on that tomorrow, and then I'm debating whether I'm just going to hardwood floor the whole thing. Just maybe lay the plywood down and just hardwood floor it at the same exact time. Just get the whole floor done. But I still have to, if I do that, because right now double bubble's going over this. So there's like Reflectix double bubble. I got it online. I think it's 120 feet long and 48 feet wide. So I can cover the entire floor of the bus with one roll. So I'm going to roll that over the top of this. So it's, and that's just like another layer of insulation. And right now, before I leave, I'm about to foil tape all of the seams. So every box is about to get foil taped, so it's perfectly sealed. Then the double bubble gets laid over top of it, and then I lay the then I lay the plywood, and then I lay the underlayment for the hardwood floors. It's like a foam mat on top of the plywood, and then I'm gonna lay the hardwood floors on top of the really thin foam mat. It's actually a 3-in-1 mat. It's a vapor barrier and foam. It just allows the floor to kind of like self-level itself if there's any like imperfections in the wood. But I'm buying the sanded plywood for the top of the floor. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's a lot easier to work with when you're laying, especially if you're gonna lay something like linoleum, or you're gonna lay something thin like those cheap tiles. You have to get like a really smooth surface on the top. Either you have to buy plywood and wood fill the holes and make it smooth, or you have to buy sanded plywood. I would just recommend sanded plywood. It's just a lot easier to work with, and it's a lot better quality wood. But yeah, that's it. Got a whole bunch of leftover pieces. Yep.